Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you. You didn't stand up when I was lieutenant governor. Man, how things change. Thank you all very much for the generous welcome and the generous introduction, and thank you for the work that you're all doing every single day. There's the old saw that says something like this: if you don't like the way the world looks when you're standing up, stand on your head and go local. Remarkable things are happening at the local level. I really believe that. The more I travel the state, the remarkable diversity of the state, 58 counties, 480 plus cities. It reminds me a little bit in the spirit of Easter week. You know, the Bible teaches us we're many parts, but one body. And when one part suffers, we all suffer. I think about that in the terms of our state. I think about that in the terms of the diversity of this state. I think about that in terms of the issues that you're trying to tackle and address every single day, regardless of your geography, regardless of the ideology that marks that geography. I recognize intimately the diversity of this state as it relates to its political frames. I appreciate that this is a state where 26 counties supported our president. I get that. I don't mean this a partisan speech. I appreciate that. I really do. I've made a point, I hope you've noted that, to spend a great deal of time outside of Sacramento and spend a disproportionate amount of time in those parts of the state. I represent the folks in Butte County. I have deep admiration and appreciation of the folks living in Placer County, not just Orange County and the Central Valley of our state, the Inland Empire. I feel a depth of responsibility to represent everybody in this state, regardless of their race and their ethnicity, their affiliation to a political paradigm that is becoming more and more polarized. I don't just, quote unquote, represent my base. I represent 40 million diverse voices and opinions. And my goal, and I think my responsibility, is to try to weave a narrative that connects that diversity to a broader value proposition. You know, this is a state where 27% of us are foreign born. Nothing like that in the United States of America. Just to put in perspective, this country just reached roughly its peak immigration number, which is 14%, 1910-ish was 14%. It's 13.7% today. But California is 27% foreign born. I mean, it's just an extraordinary fact. Our ability to live together and advance together, and I would argue prosper as we are together across every conceivable difference, is a pretty magical thing. And I think it's right in sort of Bill Clinton language that we celebrate all of our interesting differences, but it is, I think, even more important that we unite around the things that bind us together. And that's a challenge. I'm not naive about that. You know, if you extend some of the actions that I've taken to that narrative, it sort of belies. You're sitting there quietly going, well, then why'd you do the death penalty? That was divisive. I'm not arguing to sort of find a mushy middle. I'm not arguing to soften the edges just to soften the edges. But I am arguing, despite our fundamental differences on a number of issues, that there are fundamental things that matter so much more. I'm a parent. All the parents out there, there's nothing that separates us from our deep love of our children and our families. And that's inspiring. I mentioned the Bible because I deeply appreciate people of faith. I'm among you. You know, I grew up half my life in Placer County in a small town called Dutch Flat, population of about 250 people. You know, I'm someone that believes passionately in gun safety, and we grew up with a lot of guns. If you hear coyotes at night, you buy a shotgun too. Same time, I govern a progressive liberal city. You know, I get it. One size does not fit all, and that's a challenge, right? Because that's a rhetorical frame, and then we set forth all these damn mandates and sort of belies again the rhetoric. And so we're trying to work through all of that. And I'm just, again, trying to frame, and I appreciate the introduction, sort of pick up on the spirit of introduction. Yeah, I was one of you. I spent 2 terms as a county supervisor. And while San Francisco is unique as a city and a county, it's mostly a county. It's a health and human services city. I get that distinction. I get the funding paradigms, property tax versus sales tax. I get the issues of realignment in a way that you deeply appreciate. Not all people appreciate. And I appreciate you're in the how business. We're in the what and why business, but you're in the practical application of all the ideals we're espousing. You got to get things done. And I think you are the prism to which most people feel pretty good about their elected leadership. The higher we go up, the more disappointed people seem to be. Right? I don't know if it's the issue of proximity. The more proximate you are to problems, the more sensitive you are to solving them. The more then you're oriented not just on a Republican plan to solve them or a Democratic plan, but you just are committed to the plan to get it done. And I think that's important. I think we need more of that frame of reference, more of that leadership here in Sacramento, and certainly, I would argue, in capitals across the United States, including our U.S. capital. So, again, gratitude, appreciation, deep respect and honor for the work you do, a desire to work in concert with you, to partner with you, to seek, as my mom would remind me, first to understand before you're understood. It's not ready, fire, aim, ready, aim, fire. I will give you a proof point on that. We've been meeting with a number of you individually and as organization on the homeless issue. My January budget was biased towards cities. My May revise will be more balanced. One person's proof. I didn't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you a willingness to engage in the dialogue. I am not ideological. I'm open argument, interested in evidence. A little bit of brief background that wasn't in that bio. I come from a private sector mindset. I started 23 small businesses, not my parents, not my friends, not family members. I didn't invest in them, don't come from wealth. I put pen to paper, wrote business plans, managing general partner of 23 restaurants, hotels, and wineries in 9 counties in this state. I have a sense of the differentiation of how they do business down, in Palm Springs versus how they do business in Squaw Valley or in Napa. Many different worlds in the same state. When I think of business paradigm, I don't think about it from the state selling down a vision. I see it bottom up, that the state vision for economic development is going to be realized at the local level. But so too are all of our challenges. And that's what I want to just briefly get into. The issues of affordability. Not just homelessness, but housing. Localism is determinative. There is no capacity for the state to address the issue that I think defines more issues than any other issue of housing. There's no way we can address this issue unless we empower you and cities to get things done. We are 49th out of 50th, 49th out of 50th in per capita housing production. It has taken us decades to get to the bottom. We're producing roughly plus or minus 100,000 housing units on an annual basis. We need to be producing closer to 400,000 housing units on an annual basis to create some price equilibrium. We're not even in the margin of addressing this crisis. And by the way, that's a word I don't like sharing because I think it's wildly overused and it loses its resonance. But it's a crisis. The California dream is predicated on social mobility. And by the way, the California dream is unique. There's the American dream, and then there's the California dream. With all due respect, there's no Kansas dream. Now, there is a new Kansas governor. We'll see. But my point, respectfully, we share something special in common. A dream's attached to only one other state in this nation. But it's predicated on social mobility. The issue of housing costs are driving people out of this state. It's driving our wealth and income disparities. It's driving a lot of our politics. And we are the tip of the spear because in so many ways we are America's coming attraction. We are America, just more so. More abundance, more challenges and despair. More homeless, 129,924 in the last count, 24% of the nation's homeless. And more billionaires and more wealth concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. I mean, truly a tale of two states. And we have to mind that gap. My politics is not about begrudging your success, quite the contrary. I aspire to it. And I think the biggest mistake my party makes is sometimes appearing to begrudge others' success, appearing to try to tear other people down. That's not my frame. I'm not about redistribution. I am deeply about pre-distribution. You mentioned the paradigm. It's growth and inclusion. As someone with 23 businesses, businesses cannot thrive in a world that's failing. I think it's a really important point to make. Businesses cannot thrive in a world that's failing. We lead the nation in poverty for one reason: housing. Our poverty rate is marginally higher than the rest of the nation. It's slightly above average, unless you consider cost of living, which is the only thing you have to consider. Our supplemental poverty index is the highest in the nation, cost of housing. We have to address the issue of cost of housing. You don't need a fancy degree or parents that help you get one. To remember your Econ 101 class. Supply, demand. More demand, less supply, higher costs. It's not that damn complicated. I know it's a little more complicated. It's not just about production. It's about preservation of existing housing stock, and it's about prevention, and I deeply understand that. You think I could get elected in San Francisco if I didn't. But it's fundamentally about production, and we've got to get serious. And I know you saw a little of that, and I'm sure many of you weren't happy. The governor of the state of California, representing the state of California and all its diverse cities, is talking a good game about partnerships and getting along, sues Huntington Beach. And by the way, that was the right thing to do. With all due respect, we're all in this together. It's not that they're not producing housing, it's their unwillingness to even plan for housing. Don't tell me you care about these issues of affordability and homelessness. Trust me, that's a huge issue in Huntington Beach. And affordability, if you're not even willing to participate in planning to address those issues. There were 47 other cities in that, or 46 other cities in that space. I don't intend, and I didn't intend to sue all of them. In fact, we've had two extraordinary meetings, one in Long Beach, one up here, Sacramento, and the vast majority of them are getting into compliance. And the vast majority of them had good reasons for the reasons they weren't in compliance. Some just thumbed their nose. But what I'm expressing is a sincere desire to actually solve some problems. The old adage, continue to do what you've done, you'll get what you got. We can't afford to continue to do what we've done. It's a crisis. The California dream on our watch is ending. It's not a 30-year trend line anymore. I don't think it's a gross exaggeration. I think we're about to enter an age of disruption, the likes of which we've never experienced in our lifetime. Demographics, technology, something big is happening in the plumbing of the world. AI, big data, machine learning more broadly, genomics, synthetic biology, additive manufacturing. Something big is happening in the plumbing of the world. I was just down in Redlands, Inland Empire, just regaled by all the extraordinary economic growth of the last decade. It's an extraordinary part of our state. Riverside area, all the manufacturing, all the warehousing, all of the trucking. And all I can think about is, man, all of these jobs are all on the edge of automation. That if I'm flying in there 30 years from now, is it going to look like it looks today? I don't know. But one thing I know is we're not prepared for that. I mean, we're playing small ball, a few community college courses here and there. We tweak our budgets. We had $1 million, good budget. Go back to vocational training. I mean, we all talk a good game on this. But at the scale of the challenge, and by the way, this is not a skills issue and an education issue. As much or more, it's a gender issue. Look at where all those jobs, whose jobs are theirs? They're dominated by men. Just an interesting reality that has to also be considered. Job growth, increasingly in positions that have been historically more feminized, forgive me. Care economy, et cetera. But we must start considering these things in more nuanced terms. And we must consider the scale of the opportunity and the challenge, because the future happens here first. We are America's coming attraction. We have a unique role and responsibility to address these issues in real time. I went 108 miles an hour in a driverless Audi with my son, who's 7 years old, in a driverless Audi at Sears Point. Sears Point is not Fontana. It doesn't go in circles. It is remarkable. 108 miles an hour. That technology's been around, the engineer said, 5 years. We're just waiting for the light switch to go on, and you're going to start seeing the freeways. He predicts, he said, in 10 years, I predict. By the way, he's not the only one. Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, one of the most well-known futurists, says the same thing. In about a decade, it's going to be illegal for you to drive on freeways because you're too dangerous. He says it'll be very different in urban centers. That will take a lot longer. Something big is happening to the plumbing of the world. We need to prepare for that. So the issues of affordability and housing are magnified by these fundamental shifts in our economy. And California is not immune, not when you're a $2.8 trillion economy, not when you're the 5th largest economy on planet Earth, not when you are the largest trading economy in the United States, not when you're the largest manufacturer in the United States, something no one wants to believe or actually still believes, but the scale and scope, we are still the largest manufacturing state in America. It may be in decline, but we are still the largest manufacturer in the United States. So these are the opportunities, but they can't happen without you. Just briefly, and I'll close up, and forgive me for being long-winded, but I'm passionate about these issues. I put a budget out. Budgets matter. You know this. We all talk about budgets being statements of values. They are. They're demonstrable statements of values. But budgets also create tremendous anxiety from where you're sitting, especially state budgets. I remember suing the Schwarzenegger administration. I think it was like suing Trump. We did like 20 lawsuits in San Francisco. I think we were maintenance of, I mean, you name it. On IHSS, he was hitting us. That's why I took care of you on IHSS. My God, 460 million reasons. That's right. Actually, I'm a governor that knows what it stands for, all right? Jesus. Expensive. The right thing to do. But we suffered during those years. They started to claw back county money to balance their budget at the state. Budget matters. Just want you to know a couple things about the budget in the state of California. We're paying down 100% of all the debt we inherited. Governor Brown started with 34.7, this is your actual number, $34.7 billion of debt. I'm not talking pensions, I'm just talking about traditional debt. 100% of that I will pay off if the legislature approves the budget. We will have not only the highest rainy day reserve in the state's history, it will be over $3 billion above its statutory ceiling, which, by the way, is a legal question of whether or not we can get away with that. Don't mention that to the legislature. But it's $3+ billion above the statutory ceiling. We're using general fund money. You may want to consider this to pay down pension obligations. Never in our state's history have we done that. $9 billion we're using to pay down pension obligations. $3 billion for supplemental payments to deal with some of the challenges your school districts are facing on supplemental payments to STRS, which is significant and insignificant at the same time because of the magnitude of the unfunded liability. But it's an important demonstration of a long-term commitment. By the way, every $3 billion we invest, anywhere from $7.2 to $7.4 billion return on that investment in terms of addressing the long-term trend lines on that unfunded liability. We are getting rid of all the gimmicks, including the payroll gimmick, which you may want to consider the next time you're in a crisis, of moving from the 31st to the 1st, our entire payroll, which was $1 billion plus savings. We are getting rid of that gimmick and reverting back to more traditional ways of governing and managing. 86% of the surplus dollars are being invested in one-time purposes. And for those that say, boy, this is definitely a different administration than Brown's, you're right. That is a substantially higher percentage for one-time investments than the previous administration, because I am deeply concerned about upcoming recession. And I want to be more cautious than the previous administration. Their last budget, 79% of that budget, one-time surplus, was used for one-time purposes. We're at 86.4% in our current budget. We'll see what I need to negotiate to get it over the line, but I'm going to hold the line. We're modeling a recession that is a bit deeper and more problematic than 2001, but more modest than 2007 and 2008. We're modeling a $70 billion contraction in our budget, which is about a $40 billion structural imbalance. Here's the good news. We're getting close to $30 billion of resiliency in the budget. Not just the traditional rainy day reserve, but other reserves and resiliency broadly defined. My goal is to get up to $40 billion this time next year and to get the support of the legislature to do that so that we can weather a downturn in a way where you can project more stability in terms of the way you budget and start focusing more sustainably on long-term investments, not just short-term investments, to address these structural challenges that you're facing. I want you to know that's the mindset we're bringing in, despite the fact that we're putting a record amount of money into housing and homelessness, close to $3 billion of additional money in housing and homelessness. $3 billion. 1.75, $1 billion in loans and tax credits that will be made available to you. $750 million in one-time grants, $250 to address your pre-planning, press some of the needs perhaps to hire a consultant or staff to address your general plan, to update your regional housing plans. We are predicating a lot of money in the homeless space, again, which we are more equitably balancing towards counties directly and cities directly, moving a little bit away from the COCs, respectfully. Where we tilted that way last year, we're moving a little bit further away this year. But we are predicating that money, or at least establishing a framework where we need regional plans. Cities and counties alone cannot solve homelessness. We've got to regionalize approaches. That's the only thing I'm asking for you in return for that money. We've got to focus more collaboratively and build a mindset, again, where everybody is rowing in the same direction. Another $100 million in whole person care, $400 million in the No Place Like Home investments, housing, supportive service for behavioral health, people with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, the like. We're putting up matching money for you in counties for SSI advocacy. Please step up your SSI advocacy. 100% of those dollars get reimbursed by the federal government once you sign someone up. And 100% of those costs are borne by the federal government once someone signs up. And the dollar figure is such that people now have a threshold of money that they actually can get some housing where they otherwise could not afford that housing. I don't know if there's a greater investment than SSI advocacy, and that's why we put up tens of millions of dollars to match your efforts at the local level and to reduce your risks so you can make a case to your council or rather your board of supervisors and the public of the importance of putting that money up. We are doing a lot more on preschool and childcare, $1.3 billion in that space, money that we hadn't invested in. You'll get that second year of free community college. We are not going to see tuition increases at the UC and CSU. We should not. CSU is getting $562 million. UC, $393 million. They'll be fine. Trust me, I'm a regent, and boy, they are complaining still. But with respect, they need to do some reforms that are commensurate with our new commitments and investments. And if you're quoting me on that, let me fill in the blanks because that may not be well received. So I need to contextualize that if the press are here or if someone publishes a YouTube video of this. Look, we're stepping up. And, I can't promise we're going to solve all these issues overnight any differently than you can promise you're solving all these issues overnight. The homeless issue is a disgrace. It's an abomination, and it's happening on our watch. We own it. We own it. You own it. I own it. I love there's a great billboard on the 405. I don't know if this is a real story, someone told me, but it's a good story. The 405 freeway. I don't need to say much about how wonderful and joyful experience being on the 405 is. There's a big billboard that says, "You're not stuck in traffic." You're like, honey, did you see what? About 25 minutes later, you get 100 yards closer. and underneath the bold headline, "You're not stuck in traffic," in parentheses, it says, "You are traffic." Think about that. Society becomes how we behave. We are our behaviors. In the world we're critical of, in many ways we manifested. In this crisis, it's of our own making. Intentional or otherwise. We made decisions. It's not conditions, you know that. You wouldn't be in elected office, you wouldn't be leaders. It's not conditions that determine your future, it's decisions. It's the decisions we make and the decisions we defer that have created the conditions that exist in this state. The good news is, those decisions we made to get in this mess, we can shift our mindset and make better decisions to get out of this mess. And that's a point of optimism. And that's what leadership requires at this moment. And I will close with this and just say this: leadership can be found anywhere. I did not get elected to be the guy or gal on the white horse to come save the day. And I'm sure 98% of you recognize that. But we get so ginned up in elections that we somehow have this John Wayne vision of leadership that's a bit nostalgic and, sort of neglects reality, even reality of the past. But leadership needs to be amplified at a deep moment in our history where we're going through a remarkable transition. And that's why leadership at the local level is so potent and powerful. And so I just, again, as I began, I end with gratitude and admiration and deep confidence and expectation that working together over the next 4 years, that I could confidently say this about our state: the best is yet to come. Thank you all very, very much.